we really need well-known media brands or personalities or science institutions that we all can say, well, if they're saying it, it's probably true. That creates a shared reality. We already see, of course, the fracture of the shared reality because of tribal narrowcast media, each telling their own story, and social media creating bubbles of reality. And I think AI can just accelerate these trends.
Tim, I am so excited for this. As I just said to you before, I've been a big fan of your writing for many years. I just mentioned that I actually tried to pass some of it off as my own intellect on AI about 7 years ago, and it worked. So I owe you for that. But thank you for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me. And for being so well prepared.
Oh, I mean, you are very kind. I stalked the shit out of you. So I'm ready for this. But I hate shows which actually start conventionally. And so I want to start with a bit of a weird one. But think back to when you were a child. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I think it depends on the age. I think like 5, 6, it would have been something to do with space or dinosaurs. Those were my 2 obsessions then. So probably just, astronaut, something like that. Then I think, by the time I was 13, 14, 15, it was like I wanted max attention. So like president, it was just like hyper ambition, like want max everything, and president or something like that. And then that I think dissipated I was actually the class president at 17, and that was the end of me wanting to ever be a politician. It's like, this is not,
the pressure was too much.
It's just campaigning, trying to get people's votes, and then for what? So that you can have what's actually just kind of like a glorified bureaucratic, administrative role. I was like, no, I don't want that. And then from then on, it was basically like, I probably was wanted to be in something creative, music or writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have these different stages of your background. I always think that one is running from and towards something, and that our backgrounds shape a lot of how we are today. And I know it's kind of armchair psychologist, but I'm a venture investor, so we have a lot of time to think. My question to you is, what do you think you're running from, and what do you think you're running towards, Tim?
I'm probably running you spend your whole, for me, my whole first 22 years, some people a lot longer, with you're not in charge of your own day. Like, you have to go to class at this time. You have to turn in this paper by this time. You have to, and then it's like the summer and you're expected to do this thing. And then you have to take this standardized test. And then you have to go to this practice that your parents make you, and I think I hated that a lot. And even then at camp, so I loved camp. It's not like I hated school or camp. They were fine. But then I'd go to camp over the summer, and still it was like, now we're going to soccer. Now we're going to basketball. Now arts and crafts. And it was like, I think running from that, I feel like is a lot of my life has been since then has been basically centered around not having total, just having as much freedom as possible, to the point where now if I have anything on my schedule, for 5 p.m. that day, I have something that's the whole day is kind of I'm in a bad mood the whole day about it, because I just want total freedom.
Why do you think that is? I'm the same as you, but why do you think there is that unwillingness to be constrained?
I mean, I think that's I think part of what is, the part of me that hates that is not necessarily, I think there's something to freedom and having actual choices that are yours and not, so I think there's something important there. But I think more for me is honestly, there's, I always think of there's 2 characters. There's this rational decision maker, this kind of a grown up. And then there's the instant gratification monkey in your head who just wants to maximize the ease and pleasure of the current moment. And I think it's a lot that monkey that hates that. And I think that's why, to get to your other question, what are you running to? I think, designing everything to not have to have the monkey be upset by saying, I don't want to go do this thing. Even though the other part's you should, it's good for you to go. You should have to go do this thing. It's once we're there, we're always happy, and it's better than sitting around doing nothing. So I think you can go too far. And then if you don't have any of those external structured things, then you end up in you can end up with the monkey kind of running your whole life suddenly. So now it's you're actually the monkey is making the decisions, which is actually worse. So what am I running to? I feel like I'm now trying to regain that structure, but kind of on my own terms, but trying to find that medium where I'm not being told by someone else or someone else's schedule what to do every minute, but I am doing stuff that makes sense every hour, and I'm not just doing nothing. So I feel like I'm trying to now recapture some of that actual structure.
In terms of recapturing that structure, the realization of the freedom of what you have today with Wait But Why came really with, a couple of hit pieces, one of them being the Fermi Paradox, massive hit at the time. When did Wait But Why really come to be as a very viable pathway for you to pursue as a very meaningful career?
So since I was, I said like 16, 17, I was like, I need to do something creative in the arts, music or writing. And I moved to LA after college to write music. And that was my first thing. And I was blogging on the side. But then I started this business with my friend Andrew Finn. And that was fun. We were running this tutoring test prep company together. And it was great. We were working with a friend, but I had this voice that was like, this isn't the thing that you said you were going to do. You're macro procrastinating. And so actually I remember it was actually like summer of 2012. I was walking down the Manhattan Beach boardwalk with Andrew, which is where he lived. And I was like, I'm going crazy. I need to do one thing. I'm writing a musical right now on the side. I'm doing a blog on the side. I'm running this business with part of my time with you. And I need to go. And so why don't we do something, where we've done this before, where he went and worked on a project while I held down the business. And now he was like, okay, why don't, he's going to keep growing this and I'm going to go and take one of these creative pursuits and it'll be part of the kind of joint business world that we were in. And so I was like, okay, musical is fun, but it's not a great business. But writing can turn into a media empire. Who knows? Maybe we hire a bunch of writers. Maybe, it becomes a platform that can have influence. And we either way, it could be it's not just interesting to me as a creative. It can be interesting to you as well, as a business person. So we were like, okay, that's a good choice. And the key was I'm going full time, 60 hours a week on one project. And that was Wait But Why. And that was kind of the beginning. Then it took a year before I launched because of procrastination. And, it was this thing I was going to do, but I have to get a domain somehow. I have to figure out how to get social media buttons on a blog page. I have to write the things. Is every post 7 things I think about this, that? Is it like that? Or is it longer things? Is it funny or is it, I don't know. I didn't even know anything. Are we hiring other people? Is it just me? So for the sake of money, we were going to start with it being just me. And it was just kind of finally, got it together, and summer of 2013 got it started.
When did you start making money from it?
Pretty soon, it was about 10 posts in that one post really blew up, and suddenly there were a decent amount of traffic after that. So we put Google AdWords, on, and that generated some money, but I hated it. It was this is so not authentic. It was not in the spirit. It kind of made this ugly. It's I feel like I created this little special kind of custom place for people to come. And suddenly there was these other companies there, with their cheesy ads. And I was like, get out of here. So that stopped, and we turned to Patreon to try that at the urging of a friend of mine, Philip Detmer from Kurzgesagt. He was like, you got to just do it. So I tried it, and it was great. And that's been a nice support ever since. And then, when you have enough readers, you can start to supplement with stuff. We have merch, started selling things, started doing some speaking, so it's you can, there's a lot of ways to kind of cobble together revenue once you have a decent following.
Can I've actually never spoken about this, but I've never had the chance to with someone in this position. When you think about the revenue makeup of the business today, what does it look like in terms of Patreon to merch to speaking? I'm happy to also share mine and share ours if interested.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Patreon, it's hard to remember the exact percentages, but Patreon, is bigger than merch, partially because we just haven't made that much new merch recently. But there's always, there's always new patrons. And speaking on a really good year can be, bigger than both of them combined. And then, COVID, that goes away. So that goes on and off. And then just put out a book for the first time. So that was a nice one-off big, chunk of revenue. That's, so, but part of the
do you feel like you're selling your soul speaking? I've had many opportunities.
No,
before.
I don't actually, because I don't say anything that's not. It's basically just me taking what I write in my blog and translating it to a different medium, to speaking medium. I'm not gonna get up there and like speak. I'm not going to do what the conference wants me to do. If they say, I'm not going to, if they say, we want you to promote this company, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm going to basically something like, AI or the Fermi paradox you mentioned. I'll go if there's a topic that I've written about that a conference wants me to speak about, I'll just go and do the talk version, and there's slides. And, I did that with a TED talk with my procrastination post. So that's why I feel like it's just a way. It's like taking content that if I write this AI post, it actually doesn't make much money because it's just on a blog. If I now go do a bunch of talks on AI, to me, that's the way that all the work I did for that AI post actually can turn into revenue. Is like it comes later in the form of speaking.
Do you worry that to scale your revenue and scale your media business, you lose the constraint-free life that you craved? That's the exact position that I have.
That's why we haven't actually. I've been pretty resistant to doing too much that's focused on revenue because of that. Like and the same reason that 6 years ago we hired Alicia, who's the manager of lots of things, which is just like the second in command at Wait But Why and does a little of everything. And that's about it. I was just like, I don't want a big team. And, yes, we could have more money if we had more people writing, if we had a podcast production studio, we could do those things under this brand. But I just kind of resisted that because I just want to be able to like indulge my curiosity full time and work on stuff. Yeah.
Why have you never done a venture? I'm totally going off schedule, but I'm loving this.
Yeah,
Why have you never done a venture fund? It's perfectly placed. I would put in place, and I could go on about this, why you should do it. Why have you not done it?
I think it's not that I'm not open to some of these things. It's just that it's like, that's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of brain space. And I just feels like I got out of the business world so that I could just spend my time thinking about making cool like pieces of creativity, art, whatever you want to call a blog post or a book. And so I just I kind of want to just keep doing that until I'm bored. Maybe at some point I'm like, I am starting a podcast later, this year probably. And it's like, that will be a different thing, but it's still the same. It's still, it's about like expressing things that I'm learning or going on in my brain or talking to interesting people. So that to me still fits within the realm of like what I got into this for. And I'm just trying to keep it. I don't want to in 5 years or 10 years, turn around and say, this business got so big, but I actually lost what I cared about for it. I'm like, so I think look, there's a lot of, someone like Sam Harris, right? He has this big loyal audience. He's doing what he does for, pretty pure purposes. He cares about, ideas and he wants to, but he, one revenue making idea that fit perfectly with what he really does is his meditation app, and he makes a lot of money off that, so it's like if there comes around an idea, and we have a few kicking around that's like, this fits with what we're doing. It's part of the thing I want to be doing, and it also can make a lot of money, then great, we should do that. But part of what's nice about having had that business before is that we have some other revenue sources that allows Wait But Why to kind of have pure motives and not have to do anything that I don't think it fits with the brand.
I just think of venture investing like you have to have a brand that the best founders want to take. You have that with Wait But Why. You have to then be able to pick founders and companies in a better or more accurate way than others. You are able to do so through your incredible research and investigation. And then you have to be able to help founders in a variety of different ways. Your chocolate box of options, you have that most definitely in your platform distribution reach. Across the venture landscape, you have those very synchronously with your business, plus with a $10 million venture fund, which is quite small in venture funds, it really is like an hour or two a week. And actually, you could raise it in an afternoon. And
is it an hour or two a week to, I do a lot of research, but it's not that often from, startups. It's often in, established companies or in history.
I think it would, we're really being off script here, but your benchmark Sequoias of the world and the best funds would bring you in for your distribution reach, intellect, thought, So you'd get incredibly high quality flow. Your selection ability would be very high given the deep dives that you do. And so I honestly think, yeah, you could constrain it. And then with a platform like AngelList, the back office and admin is minimal. And so maybe it's not an hour or two, maybe it's half a day, max 4 hours, but it's pretty light for a potential 8 to 10 million windfall on a 4 or 5x fund. And actually pretty good. Like I would
maybe we should talk more, and you can continue talking me into it. Because every time I hear anything like that, I'm always like, icky, like other whole thing that I have to do. Like, this is kind of what I was saying with stuff on my schedule. I have such a resistance to, I know what that would turn into, which is like, it's Thursday night. I'm like, oh, so much like writing I need to do tomorrow. And then I look and I'm like, oh, second half of the day is blocked off for this VC. And I'm like, oh, no, go away. And that's the fear. That's always the fear. And maybe that's too, maybe I go too far in that direction, but just like anything that's going to start like having stuff on the schedule, it feels very claustrophobic suddenly. And it feels like, it's like invading my space to just like think and learn and write. But maybe again, as I said, I'm also trying to kind of get out of that mindset a little bit and like be kind of more okay with like having an efficient block for writing every day, and I don't have to have the whole day open. That's a pretty big constraint. If you have to have the whole day open, you can't take on other things.
Tim, do you feel claustrophobic in relationships? It's like speaking to a mirror, me and you.
Actually, I don't in relationship. Well, I don't know, because I wasn't in many relationships until I met my wife. And so I'm not claustrophobic with her at all. We're very on the same page about, we're both very independent. We also like kind of just coexisting in the same place, but she's like very open to me, just like really deep. If I need to focus on something like that's always okay. And like, so I don't feel claustrophobic in this. So I don't know if I would feel claustrophobic. I think if I were in a relationship where she was like, okay, it's like, 5 p.m., like work's over for the day, let's go do something, or like, it's like Saturday, we don't go on the computers on Saturday. I think I might want to run away. That's not my situation. So
by the way, I loved your piece on picking the right partner, which goes to actually what I did want to talk about before I went drastically off piece there. But it's actually on topic selection, because you have this incredible variety of topics that you focus on. And the first thing I wanted to break down in the process of your work is topic selection. One of your friends who I spoke to described you as the most genuinely curious person they've ever met. My question from that was, how do you determine between interests to pursue and write about versus those that you won't cover and won't write about and examine deeper?
I think it really is. It is about kind of it's like curiosity and kind of almost say just kind of excitement. Like, if I think about like there's certain, I don't know, topics that I would think about, or where I'm like excited to do it. And it's not just, curiosity is one thing. Like, when I first read about Neuralink and I started to understand what they were doing, I was like jumping out of my seat to like write about it, because it seems so cool. And I just wanted to like, it seemed like a game to try to like take everything I was learning and like, what's the story here? What's really like how would I, if I had a bunch of friends sitting around, like how would I explain this to them? And like, this like incredible story, like how do I tell it? Okay. But then there's also sometimes just like, I don't know, like, like procrastination or life partner, stuff like that. That's not like necessarily curiosity as much as it is, I know I have a bunch of swirling thoughts in my head. A lot of times those posts emerge from conversations with friends. Like, we're always just talking about this. We're always talking about like, I'm always thinking about my own, work habits and procrastination and what's going on there in the head. And I have this idea, this is characters in the head. Or I'm always talking about relationships with my friends, and we're saying that these are the 3 things that actually matter, or whatever they are. And so then it becomes like, the thing that would excite me there is like, I'm going to now take that's kind of scattered thoughts and I'm going to make like an official framework, which is just the kind of thing I would just do when I'm procrastinating, or like I'd want to be, I would think, okay, how many it's been 6 million years since we diverged from chimps. Okay. Like how many generations is that? Like how many great grandfathers do you have to go back before you get to like a full monkey situation? And like, that's so interesting to me. So then I want to like, okay, I'm going to make a chart and like I would just do that on my own, just to like be like, okay, so that's, I don't know, 6 million years, and just say there's, 30 years. So that's 200, for generation, that's 200,000 generations. Okay. So if there's like 100, that's 2,000 in a row. And I'm trying to picture, wow, that's how many like greats you have to go back to get to monkeys. So I would just do this in my own head. So that's a perfect topic. There's a lot of topics I'm not curious about, or that I think about writing about, and I'm like, sounds icky. Like, there's a lot of stuff about like, I don't know, philosophy. People talk about like the self and like consciousness. I'm kind of just like, it's just like, I don't know, it's abstract. And crypto, people wanted me to write about crypto, and I was kind of just like, I don't know. It's like, this hasn't proven yet to be a huge part of the future. And if not, then it just seems so boring to write about. So there's plenty I'm not curious about. So it's just what kind of grabs me, where it seems like a delicious topic potentially.
When you find something that is a delicious topic, but you're not versed enough to write the incredible works that you do about it, but you've decided you want to do the work, what does that learning process look like from decision to write about it to starting to write about it? How do you do your research and learning?
Yeah, so this part is a fun process. I mean, it's because if it's the right topic, it's a fun process because it's just like, yeah, it's just fully indulging curiosity, and it's kind of exhilarating going from. I always use the scale of like a 10 out of 10 knowledge is like the world's leading expert, and a 1 out of 10 is you haven't even like heard of the topic. And so for most topics, I don't know, I'm a 2 or 3 or 4, something around there, where I'm like, I know a decent amount about this, but and I could talk about it with smart people and not say anything stupid, and I have a sense of how it works. But as soon as but I don't actually really know what's going on here. There's endless topics like this, so my goal is never to get to like the 8 or 9 or 10. That would take years. You really, that takes, years, and you have to understand all the different schools of thought and how they interact with each other. And you have to deeply understand the technical, nitty gritty of it. And have debated it and argued and written dissertation, toiled through something like that and then had to defend it. No interest. No, there's too many. I don't think I think it doesn't, that's a limit on how interesting, there's a diminishing return on like excitement as you keep putting those years in. So for me, it's like, I want to get from like a 2 or 3, to a 6, 5 or 6, something like that, where it's like, oh, okay, I understand this way more deeply now. And actually like, I have a really intuitive sense of like what's going on. So I don't know, like, like I'm currently, researching something on like the origin of life, right? And like, and before I was like, okay, there's like some kind of, first cell. There's some kind of like or early particle that has like the property of self-replicating, and it goes from there. But that's not actually knowing very much. And now I'm like, so anyway, to answer your question, here's what I would do. Here's what I do at that point is I'm like, I'll honestly sometimes just start Wikipedia. Just read the Wikipedia article, because Wikipedia is often a good overview of the schools of thought, of the controversial, what's controversial, what's not. It does a decent explainer, and they range. Some Wikipedia articles are amazing and they're really good, and some are actually not good. They're way too technical and long, or they're just not updated enough, and you can see they're kind of short. But I'll give something like that a try. I'm just starting to I want to understand the shape of the topic that I need to even know where the holes are in my knowledge. And so then I'll often, I'll read some articles, right? I'll watch YouTube videos are great. Just to start, like, it's like, I'll watch a YouTube video on one part of the topic, and it's like, okay, here's like, it paints one of the facets of this shape. And then a different YouTube, and so I do this for a while just to understand like the general thing. Then I'll start going deeper. Usually like I'll pick up a bunch of books. So like for Origin of Life, I'll read a couple Richard Dawkins books, and there's a book called The Early or Life. What's it called? It's by Noel, Life on an Early Planet, maybe. And partially as you read, you see the sources that you see people get brought up again and again. You're like, I need to go read that person's book. Maybe I'll actually read The Origin of Species, or, skim through it, or, you can use ChatGPT to summarize some of these books. So, but the big point here is I'm not worrying too much about each source. I'm just, in bringing information in, and then I'll usually try to do it in Kindle app so I can on my computer or iPad so I can highlight, because then that's nice to go back and just look through the highlights.
Okay, so just so I get it right on the note-taking side, so you use Kindle app there, and for others, for YouTube videos, for articles, do you just do Word docs, Google Docs? I'm just trying to get a framework for how you do.
I'll have like a text edit doc that's just very basic, where I'm just starting to like, if there's something, I'm like, oh, okay, I just learned about like metabolism versus replication as the two theories. Okay, and this YouTube video actually like explained it pretty well. So I just want to be able to come back here and reference this, and just make sure so I'll like save the, you can get the hyperlink that's at a certain time. So I'll just kind of like write, metabolism versus blah, 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 YouTube, and then I'll highlight YouTube. I'll hyperlink the YouTube to that place. So I can just go. And I just have a lot of that. I'm not going to bring out full paragraphs because I have highlights for that, but I'll say like Dawkins 254. And I know that that's like the highlight at 254. And as this happens, what happens is, it's like early on, it feels like daunting, and you can feel the fog. You can see it's like this. I don't really get what they're talking about. What is metabolism exactly? It's like is it energy? Is it when you process energy, or is it when you construct something or deconstruct something, or is that what enzymes do? And what's the difference between like, as an enzyme and a catalyst? Are they synonyms, or are they? You can feel foggy. You feel like I know if I wrote at that point, someone who really knows the topic would wince at like the terminology that's not quite right, and the way I'm talking about it is like shows some ignorance. So I'm definitely not ready to write then. But what happens is, as you read more and more, you start to just get it better. Like it starts to make sense. And what's really gratifying is then I'll often go back and read the same source that I did earlier. I'll read the really good sources again now when I'm closer to the writing time. And it's so satisfying reading them again and being like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. And that's this really fun process. Or I'll go rewatch a YouTube video that was a little confusing to make sure, because that's a test. Like I should now be able to understand this YouTube video perfectly. Is there any fog still?
Do you ever worry that a topic is too complex or intellectually challenging, intense for a broad audience? When you talk about metabolism there versus whatever it was that you were talking about, I got no idea. Now, it may be intellectually interesting past a certain level, but unlike the zeitgeist of AI, crypto, climate change, hot topics of the day, it's almost too intellectually challenging for an audience. Is that ever a question for you?
No, because this is my job. So now my job, basically as I read, right? So, again, if I'm really trying to write a book chapter or good blog post, I'll read, 5 or 6 books, maybe more. I'll skim through chapters of other books and a bunch of papers and YouTube video, whatever. It's a lot. And along the way, you come across a perfect metaphor that's a dopamine hit, and I'm either going to use that metaphor and credit the person, or I have my different version of it stoked a metaphor that, that made me realize I have a better metaphor for this that I'm going to use. But I will note all these like dopamine hit moments. I'm like, oh, that clicked, right? That's important. And at the end, basically my job is there is something, the origin of life is officially interesting, right? And now the question is, how deep do you go? So if you don't go deep enough, now most educated people, like, you're not teaching them something too new. And it's actually not that, if you're just saying that there was a molecule that had the property of self-replication and that started happening, and sometimes it would replicate incorrectly, and then that was variation. And before you know it, there's like Darwinian evolution, and that leads to all of the animals we see today. Okay, that's not like deep enough. Like people know, I didn't really teach most people anything new there, and it's not interesting because it's so broad. So then you can go deeper, right? And it gets more and more interesting. And I know this because I use myself as the focus groups, because I know what I just got dopamine hits from when I was like, oh, that is so cool, right? Okay, perfect. Because my readers are going to think that's so cool too. And then other things, I'm like I'm deep in this chapter and I'm like, this is so boring. It's like so specific now. I'm getting to like the really, really deep. So I'm using the origin of life. But AI is like this. You can go, I can explain ChatGPT. Again, if you explain it the really broad way, you'd say something like, this is, a large language model, which allows you to ask questions and it uses the whole internet, as data to answer them. Okay. Not saying anything new there. I can go deeper and try to explain, how large language models work and how it's just this complex process of choosing the next word, using a brute force of computation, whatever. And okay, maybe that's more interesting. You can go really deep and start to explain how transformers actually work and all this jargon. And now you get to really boring again, right? And so any topic you mention, there is, you can keep going until it gets really technical and boring. And so my job is to basically have good taste for what is actually interesting to people like me, reasonably smart, educated people who are very curious, but don't know that much about this topic, but they'd like to know more. What's that sweet spot of, what are the things and the ways of explaining it that are going to make them, have, if I had dopamine hit every hour while researching, I want them to have one every minute while reading my post.
Have you ever had it where you thought a topic would be interesting, but post-research, it is not as interesting as you thought?
Yeah, because some topics are, it's like I thought they were, I'm trying to think of examples of this. Like, well, as I'm saying, usually if you just get to the right level of depth, I'm trying to think if there are topics that are just not interesting anywhere in the level of depth. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I can think of that many topics that I would research in the first place, where I know that there's something that seems interesting to me, where there's not anything interesting there. Again, sometimes the depths of it are very boring, and sometimes, but that is, as a writer, I do a lot of filtering. So there will be subtopics. I was just, I was going to put a section in my book about ice ages and why they happen. And then I realized I'm still researching this, but I was like, this is so complicated. It's actually not. I thought it was because the sun is just angled, the earth angles this way every 26,000 years and it changes. And I'm like, no, it has to do with all this chemical stuff from the earth and it has to do with the atmosphere. And I'm like, if I feel bored, then I feel like I'm back in a boring high school class. Out. I'm not going to write that. I'm not going to write it about it.
I have this sometimes with shows. Have you ever had it where you think it's interesting, you do it, but post-release, it doesn't resonate with audience in the same way that your interest resonated with it?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's hard to know what specifically, within the post resonated. I think if I had more granular information on this paragraph bored 90% of people, I'd be like, oh shit, that's surprising to me. I thought it was, so I don't really know, it's I know how well the post in general did. I think what would surprise me is which parts were most interesting. But
which post has done the worst that you thought would do well?
Early on in the first, year of Wait But Why, my goal was to go viral most of the posts, right? Then I started just doing stuff I was, just purely that grabbed me and that I thought would be fun to write about. But early on, it was let's get some readers here. And so the first 10 posts, it was maybe this one mega viral. I'm like, no, this one mega viral. Oh, this one's hilarious. I'm like, nah, it wasn't hilarious. And I'm like, this one's going to be super controversial. I'm like, no one cared. So, there were definitely posts early on that I was, I thought this one, I wrote a post on something called the Apple game that my friends and I love. And it's you rate everyone by, their, so Apple has skin, flesh, and then a core. So every person is kind of like that, where the skin is the vibe they give off when you first meet them. And then the flesh is who their friends know they really are. And the core is who they really are deep, deep, deep down. Maybe only their spouse or their best friends know. Maybe no one besides them know. And so for each one of these, you give a good or a bad. So someone can be a good, bad, good. Means they have they come off really well, they're friendly, but then you get to know them better and they're a huge asshole actually. And they will talk shit about those people that think they're friendly. And then, but deep down in their soul, they're quite good. So it's they're a good, bad, good. So anyway, this game is so fun with my friends. And I was this is going to be an internet sensation. I'm going to publish it. It's going to go everywhere. It's going to be the only thing people are talking about. No. Some people have told me that it is their favorite post, a few here and there, but it didn't catch. Meanwhile, then a couple weeks later, I write a post called Why Generation Y Yuppies Are Unhappy, which was the word that was before we called them millennials. It was right before millennials became the topic, the term. But it was basically why millennials are unhappy. And I again, it was the same exact feeling. I was this is going to catch fire when I post it. This is everyone's going to, this is going to be, and it did. And it totally did. That one got, it got 14 million people read that in a week. It was a huge, so I thought that was going to happen 7 times before it actually happened. I think those are the hardest ones when you're trying to go viral and write something that's going to that's very hard to predict. And you kind of get some luck. As far as a topic that I'm I think this is interesting. I think I think if I find it really interesting, there's at least a certain critical mass of my own readers that will usually agree with that.
I constantly struggle with the element of something does well, and so I do more of it, versus doing it for myself and my own interest. I almost don't want to be swayed by the data, and I just want to focus on high quality output. I find sometimes the best shows performing wise are because they feature, I'm not saying Elon Musk, I haven't had him on the show, but like because you feature Neuralink or Elon and it's a well-known name and brand association, or it's AI or it's crypto or whatever that is, versus what actually is natural and interesting. How do you think about that juxtaposition between the interest and the chasing viral?
I think it's not that I don't chase viral anymore. But I'll do it. It has to also go along. For example, crypto would have been a perfect post. I know it would have been viral at the moment when it was right at the heat when everyone was talking about crypto. And I got a lot of requests to write about it. And I just know people just were dying to learn about it. I could have like dug in for 2 weeks, read everything, talked to a bunch of people, written like the full crypto explainer. But I just didn't want to. And I think early on, if I knew that I had almost a guaranteed, million people in the first few days viral post, I would have done it. Right? It was just then it was like, take that, amazing. People are gonna. But I think I built up a readership now where it's like one viral post doesn't do that much for that readership, and I kind of already have what I wanted during those early days was a regular sizable readership. So now that I have that, it's just less, like it's much more about like my motive, my internal motive is always just, like I said, excitement, something that I think would be fun. My external motive now is more about like the existing readership and putting out something that they love. Like that's great. Like if I think like that my actual readers will like love this, then that's very exciting versus like this is gonna go viral and a ton of new people are gonna like learn about. I'm like that doesn't do it as much for me.
If we think about kind of making something your readers love, we've mentioned the incredible research that you do, how you bring it all together. Now we need to get to the writing phase. What does the writing process look like for you? Literally, like, where do you do it? How long does it take? How do you do it? Does it differ by article? Can you take me to that?
Yeah, well, man. I mean, so blog posts is one way, right? It's like I would have done all my research. I've learned the shit out of the topic, right? Or I've like built the framework in my head for how I want to explain this psychological thing or this thing in society or whatever. And I've toiled over the outline and I know what I need to know and I have the plan and now I'll go write. And that, I don't know, I'll write. I can usually pound out. I can have some, pretty big days there. If I have a deadline I've imposed to myself and I say this post is going to be up Friday, then I can like probably write 2,000 or 3,000 words a day, Thursday and Friday, and get it up. My last book, my first real book that I just published in February, I tried to basically do it that way, to plan and research everything and then write. And that was just not okay. That's not how you do it. So it's just too big a book. You have to kind of read and research and outline and write all kind of intermingled as you go, at least for me. I'm sure some writers can do it the other way. But so now I'm so I think blog post is a small enough thing that I think I can just kind of like get into a multi-day flow when you're just like my wife calls it like dead on the inside mode that like she was in during law school finals, when it's just like you're in a certain zone where it's like someone like, you haven't eaten anything and you just like you just kind of absentmindedly grab like a granola bar and you're eating it while still typing, and like there's no inclination to procrastinate or do anything fun because you're just on a mission. And you're probably usually, for me, because I'm panicked because I'm like, I need to finish this thing. And like, it's like so that's not a pleasant zone to be in, but that's when a lot of Waypoint posts have been written in that zone. A book, you can't be in that zone for 4 months straight or however long it takes, 6 months to actually type the words. So for this book I'm working on now, I'm on a pretty strict regimen of, I have to do 800 new words a weekday. And if I get behind one day because I'm doing extra research, then I have to catch up later that week. So that compiles.
Do you ever have writer's block?
Yeah, I mean, I call it like a snag. I think fiction writers must really have like a certain kind of writer's block when they just don't feel like they feel very like untalented, and it's like you feel like I'm like I don't know how I used to do this. I don't know how anyone does this. I'm not good at this. So I feel that sometimes for sure. But mine's a version of it, like maybe a more nonfiction version where I'll hit a snag where I don't know. I don't like what's coming out. Like, I'm like, this is not, I don't like the structure here or something, or I don't know how to do the structure, this next section, or I don't really understand the topic in this next part well enough, and I have to go read, but I don't even know where to start. And you'll want to do anything other than this project, just hugely procrastinating, inclination in that moment. So I have huge moments of despair. And in those moments, and this is, I think, a lot of just anyone doing creative projects, you just feel very like untalented at what you're doing. You feel like I don't know why anyone thinks I'm good at this. Like, I don't know how to do this. And that's like a very common feeling. And I definitely get there. And you just have to have faith.
What do you do when you hit the snag?
Well, I think if I don't have the right external pressure on me, I procrastinate it'll just destroy my productivity for weeks on end. While I just each day avoid getting into it, and then I get into it and I'll research instead of trying to write, and then I'll try to re-outline the whole thing, and then I'll think that's a good thing, and the next day I wake up and I hate the new outline, and it's unpleasant. But yeah.
Do you work best in morning, in evening, with coffee, in sitting room, on laptop, on iPad? Take me to the magic.
Honestly, that can be.
Does the magic happen?
For me, I like the computer, whether it's on my external monitor, which is the 32-inch monitor in my apartment, or it's on my laptop. They're fine. The monitor is a little nicer and like a nice chair. It's like great, but laptop is fine. I can have my workflow. I'm good with the keyboard shortcuts. Small screen, I can still do my thing. iPad is good for me for reading, Kindle research, and highlighting, and that's about it. Because if I can't easily just while reading something, just like boom, idea, keyboard shortcut to the dock, like type it in, and it's just, to me, it's like now getting too. I don't know, maybe I think someone who's better with like iPad apps, specific like apps that are made for both iOS and Mac OS, like could do it better, but I don't like. And then phone, like disaster. I could never work on the phone other than like listening to an audiobook for research or something. For me, it's got to be the computer.
So I say two things on content and winning at content. One, consistency is everything. Your reader has to know, or your consumer has to know, when the next thing is coming. It needs to be a habit in their consumption. Do you agree with the importance of consistency?
I think it's very important when you're getting started, because people want to know what's happening. They're not going to just check your site, right? And you don't have a huge email list yet or anything. So it's critical, I think, early on to be like, I started with a new post every Monday and Thursday, and then I changed it to every Tuesday. And for the first year, while I built up my readership, sometimes it was Wednesday, even Thursday, but it was a new post every week. And that was, I think, very important for the first year. And then at that point, I had a big email list, and a big email list makes it less important to have consistency. I still think it's better than not. I think that, it's not ideal the way I do things, but I'm very inconsistent now. I'll disappear for a while, and then I'll come out with something big, and then I'll disappear for a while. But the big email list and social platforms, they make it less important because I can ping the email list when it's done. So it's like, then they all come to read it then, as opposed to if the only way people are seeing your stuff is if they think to come to your site to check if there's something new. You got to be consistent if that's the main thing going on.
Agreed. The next thing I say is actually volume is everything today. It is purely a game of output. You need Instagram shorts. You need YouTube shorts. You need Instagram reels. You need TikToks. You need podcast episodes. You need blog posts. You need Twitter threads. You need to be everywhere because attention is currency. And it is a game of volume and quantity today, more than anything, actually. I think you'll disagree, but I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think the way I view it is, if I make something, a blog post, okay, where can this just, without any work, also create stuff on other platforms? So if I did drawings, okay, which of those drawings are good standalone Instagram posts or tweets? which ideas, as I did it, from the research or from from the post itself, like, are good tweets or whatever. If and when I have a video podcast, okay, let's make clips for Instagram Reels and for TikTok and for YouTube Shorts. So I think, like, yeah, it's a very good bang for your buck to basically photocopy parts of what you've already done onto these other platforms. I don't think that a new creator needs to be worrying about, I'm only doing like writing and drawing right now. I need to also be doing TikTok. So we need to start doing video to make sure we have stuff on TikTok. I think they should focus on doing an A++ at one thing. And then that one thing, spreading it on as many social places that, make sense for that particular thing, and just focusing on that. That's what I think. I think someone who's crushing it on TikTok doesn't also need to have a big Twitter. I don't think they need that. I think the one argument to have something going on every platform is platforms change, and you don't want to have. It's like diversifying your attention portfolio. You want to have. You want to de-risk and not say, if everything's in Facebook and Facebook becomes unpopular, you just lost everything. So you want to diversify.
I think that and ease of transportability across platform. Like, if it is super easy to move a TikTok,
if it's super easy, why not? Right? It's just an automatic, easy.
I always say also, whatever time you spend creating content, you should spend the same time or more distributing. How do you approach content distribution today? You press publish. What then?
So if it's a blog post, honestly, we're not like, we could be doing better at this. Like, I think, right now, if it's a blog post, I'll publish something and then I'll probably like pull out a bunch of potential, like I'll pull out into a folder a bunch of things for this is a bunch of good Instagram posts that can come out of this post. Here's a bunch of tweets, and Alicia might publish them over the next couple of weeks. For the book that I published, like we pulled out a bunch of social content that can be done for the book. But basically on day one, we have a very specific regimen, which is publish, then basically put out a tweet, Facebook, Instagram, and send it to the big email list. Email list is the biggest thing for us. So send it there. And then, Patreon, we usually let patrons know the night before, right when it comes out, be a little before everyone else. And that's about it, and then after that, like, what are some we extract some social media posts from this post for the next couple of weeks. I think other people probably are better than we are at this. I think, again, once we have a podcast, okay, now it's pretty obvious to make like video clips and post them on those places. So we'll do that and promote it on the normal places. But like, I do a very basic kind of, I don't know, like 2015 technology job at this. I'm sure some people are way more sophisticated than I am.
Can I ask you, do you enjoy being a brand yourself?
I'm not sure I'm a brand, but I like, as far as like having people know me for like the stuff I'm doing, is totally great and gratifying specifically because the stuff I'm doing feels very true to me. It feels high quality, and it feels like that's like the real thing I should be doing. I think if I were, I think that I've experienced this when I'm whether you're known publicly or just amongst, people in the industry or whatever, for something that feels like this is what I'm doing now, but I really want to do this and I should be doing this. And I'm just doing this now because that's a bad feeling. I think it feels, you're always like a little bit, it's like a little soul crushing doing your stuff. And so I think that's why I think it's really important, if you are going to especially do like kind of creative stuff, do the stuff that like is the ideal thing for you to be known for, not just the thing that can get attention, quickest, because you're going to end up in a bad place.
How staccato has your growth in subscribers been? And what I mean by that is, people often think that it's like, I did this interview and it went bang, and then it went flat, and then I did this interview and it went bang. And it's not true, really. Actually, there was no like bang moment. It just gradually compounded over time. Was yours quite kind of staccato, up flat, or was it much more linear?
Okay, so it's not exactly like the extreme is like it's right angles. It's like straight up, flat, right? And then versus the other extreme is a perfect diagonal. I would say I'm in the middle where it's like a steeper diagonal after a big post, or sometimes it's a tweet. Sometimes I'll put out a tweet that happens to go super viral, and a bunch of new Twitter followers come in, and then like the blog traffic spikes, and then most of those people will come and then forget about you, even if they like what they see. But the people that happen to love it, they'll stay. And now it's like a spike, and then when the dust settles, like the base number is a little higher. So there'll be those steeper moments, but then it's never totally flat specifically because of the nature of Wait But Why is like you mentioned, like certain posts that are evergreen, that are they're kind of out there being salesmen all the time. So like there's always some traffic on the really popular posts, even years after they're written. And there's, so when you put work out like that, it's always going to be building your audience. Your audience is going to be kind of, building on its own, or people are, someone retweets your tweet, even though you wrote it a bunch a long time ago, that tweet now just got you a few new followers. So I think it's more like steeper diagonal, like shallow diagonal, steeper diagonal, more shallow diagonal.
Tim, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you started? There's a lot in terms of our growth that I wish I'd known. What do you know now that you wish you'd known?
I guess I just wish I had known I've gotten much better at managing my own issues. Like, I wish I'd taken my own issues dead seriously from the beginning and been like, the first year or two, there was such excitement and such pressure to be consistent that like that was an external deadline. But when there's less of that, like I just described, I would go and hit a snag and it's like 3 weeks. Now I feel like I've gotten way better at managing my own situation. So like if I have to do a certain amount per day, or else I have to pay my friends a whole lot of money, and they can see the Google Docs, so like it's no way to hide. The snag just doesn't last that long. You just push through it, you force through it. So I've learned a lot of mechanisms like that that are helping me be like a lot more productive and a lot less miserable during this process. Cause like
What other mechanisms work for you? I love the pay. I do one where it's like, if I have a protein bar, which I became addicted to, I will give $10,000 to a cause which I really dislike.
Yeah, of course. So there's two things baked into the 800 words a day thing I have going right now for this book. One is that it is that, yes, there's external pressure. So you have to do it and you can't hide, like you have to do it. And that feels like a school deadline. It doesn't feel good in those moments, but it's specifically that negative feeling. And it's negative because you can't escape. You have to do it. So it's just like misery because I have to do this. And then you do it. And then you feel so much better that you did it, as opposed to that not as miserable, but you're in a light simmering misery that lasts for weeks because there's this dread of this thing you have to do, versus it gets much higher because you have to do it now, but then you do it. So there's that aspect, like the external pressure, but the fact that I'm saying 800 words a day, not like 1,500 words, which I think old me would have said 1,500 words a day, because I've done 1,500 words a lot of times on a day, but that's a good day and you can't expect a good day. So it's like, what's like a 4 out of 10 day? Just to make sure you have at least a 4 out of 10 day every day. And that compiles, compiles
to 4 out of 10 day. Do you not like, I'm always terrified of mediocrity. It's probably my biggest thing in life.
Well, when I say 4 out of 10, I don't mean like the writing is a 4 out of 10 or, my happiness is a 4 out of 10. I'm saying that I just get a good hour and a half of writing in, which, if I look at all the days I've written in the past, there are a lot of days better than that when I've really gotten into a 3 or 4 hour flow and written 2,000 or 3,000 words. That's an 8 or 9 out of 10 day as far as pure productivity, but there's a ton of zeros in there, miserable zeros, tons and tons of zeros. And so it's like, instead of having a bunch of zeros and then some huge days, let's try something different. And let's try to have at least a mediocre productivity day every day, because that compiles in 8 months, you finished a book.
How do you deal with and handle the critics, the shit feedback, the ones that say you're an idiot and you're a moron and we hate you?
I as a blogger, I think first of all, some people just shouldn't do this. If you're going to be really upset by that, it's going to ruin your day. There are some people who they can read 100 positive comments and then one negative one and their day is ruined, right? And that's, I think a lot of creative people are like that and they persist anyway, but it can be really discouraging if that's how you feel. And so, the way I handle it mostly is I just remind myself of the big picture. So sometimes there will be, I don't know, let's say 500,000 people read a blog post. And, you can look at like how many shares and likes there are. And there are like 80,000 or something like that. And then there are 300 comments. And 40 of those comments are really nasty and negative because maybe this was a post. On my science post or procrastination post, there's almost no negativity. There's some people that are thoughtfully correcting me. And that, I think, that doesn't even put me in a bad mood. I think that's interesting. And I'm like so happy that I have like smart people here who are like engaging in, constructive disagreement. So I'm talking about like, if I write about politics or something, I'm going to have, a handful of nasty, comments, personal, whatever. And so I'm like, you can look at those and get upset, or you can say 500,000 people read this. 80,000 people liked or shared it. 300. So this is a very small, non-representative sample of the big group. It's the kind of people who comment. 300. And most of those, 85% of those were positive or neutral. And so we're talking about 40. And so then I would think like, if there are a stadium full of 80,000 people who shared it and liked it, picture 40 people in that stadium that are like, this sucks. Suddenly it rolls off your back because you're like, this is not a bit, it's like, it's inevitable. Like if you write something that has that about politics, that has a lot of attention. And it's not that, by the way, it's not that I think that only 40 people didn't like it. A lot of the 500,000 people, who didn't like it aren't going to comment. So it's not that I'm like, everyone loved this. No, it's like, yeah, some people didn't like it, but it's inevitable. If you're doing something that has a strong point of view, especially on something controversial, it's going to piss people off. And so I think you can do these kind of thought experiments. This is A, inevitable. B, if you look at the whole big number, it's a small minority. C, that person who are saying something, nasty, there's a good chance they barely follow you. A lot of times these people aren't even fans of yours. They just came across it. And maybe that's their 12th negative comment of the day on a blog because they're just the kind of person, they're just going from blog to blog. So these kind of rational thoughts can just make the emotions simmer to being like, and almost like you kind of laugh and just move on. And it truly doesn't bother you if you can get there.
Final one before we discuss one piece in particular, and then we'll do a quick fire. What piece are you most proud of, and which piece do you get most pushback on?
I'm probably, I don't know, like I'm proud of some of those long explainers, like the SpaceX post, I think was like, there was a big story to tell there. And I think after a lot of like thinking and toiling, like came up with a very good way to tell that story. And I think I told it well. So I'm very proud of like that. And I think that I know people, that post like inspired some young people to go work at SpaceX and work in that industry. And so I'm very happy about that. And what was the other question?
Which piece do you receive the most pushback on, the most critic?
Oh, without question, my stuff on this last book I wrote and the series before, just anything to do with American politics. There is not any single thing you could write about American politics that some people won't hate in America. Hate. So, for without question, just wading into the world of politics and political tribalism, again, I think a lot of people like those things. I think it clicked well with most of my audience, but there's a lot of, I'm so disappointed this coming from you. I used to respect you. There's a lot of that. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. I'm sad. I'm like, I wish all the readers liked it, but like, it's inevitable. And that's, you don't get into you don't write about politics if you can't handle some of that.
And my mother always taught me you never talk about politics or religion at dinner parties.
Which is basically what I just did at a very public dinner party. So
very, very interesting choice. I do have to ask about the AI article before we do a quick fire. As I said, I studied it years ago to hopefully get a job in venture. It worked well for me. When you look back on the piece, it was 2015. So much has changed 8 years on. What do you think you got right with the piece? I'm sure you've reflected on it a lot, especially recently.
I think that the general principles are pretty much correct. I think, the concepts that there's narrow intelligence and general intelligence and, artificial superintelligence, and that that the implications of the danger of these things are intense, and that AI is probably going to be dangerous not because it's going to be evil Terminator robots, but because it's going to be super powerful with unintended consequences. I think all of that holds up pretty well. And to be clear, very little of that was my own research or principles. I had a few major sources there. I had Nick Bostrom, Ray Kurzweil, and James Barat, and Eliezer Yudkowsky, a handful of the of people who basically I synthesized what they were saying, and I tried to tell distinguish which camps were rich, and which is again part of my job is not necessarily to do the deep research and actually come up with the original theories, but to try to summarize what the experts are saying and try to give a bird's eye view of what they're all saying, and where is their agreement and disagreement, what's the best case scenario and worst. So I think it did its job. I'm proud of that piece. I think it holds up pretty well. Obviously, it's 8 years later. So in a world that's of a technology that's changing so quickly, it's a snapshot of what we knew and thought in 2015.
Is there anything you think you got wrong in the piece? Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would do differently?
It's hard to remember the details so well. I'm sure I could have probably run it by a few real pros. I think I've heard some quibbles with some of like the technical specs I put in. I think that, knowing what I know now, I could also just explain a lot more stuff. I understand it better, but I think I'll give myself a pass on most of that. I think 2015, it was about the best I could have done then, with the information that I had then. With a time crunch.
I was running the other day, listening to you on This Week in Startups with Jason, who we both like very much. You said of its ability, and this is AI's ability, to shape civilization to its core. As you've thought about it over the last 8 years, and now seeing it come into fruition more than ever, how do you think about the most dominant ways AI can shape civilization to its core?
Civilization is just a bunch of people with a certain shared set of understanding of the world and certain set of norms and processes and systems and institutions that we all share trust in. And that is the kind of, those are the support beams of the house we're in. And AI is a giant seismic, asteroid landing in a fairly fragile set of equilibria, and it can just it can very quickly, what if no one can trust a video anymore? Every video might have been AI, it might be real people. No one knows, you're seeing a tweet, you're listening to a podcast or a talking head on Zoom on a TV interview, and you have no idea if that's a real person or not. There's a lot of assumptions that we all take for granted that create a lot of stability. And so when suddenly a lot of
I think about this a lot, actually. And I think so number one, verification as a layer becomes one of the most valuable, but I think value accrues to existing media brands because verification becomes more and more challenging. And so the authentic followership that we have becomes more valuable because it becomes more and more difficult to gain new authentic followership. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I think that's also, I think, trusted, that's what's, part of what concerns me about like so much of the media getting swallowed up by partisanship is like, we really need, well-known media brands or personalities or science institutions that we all can say, well, if they're saying it, it's probably true. That creates, once we have that creates a shared reality. And I think that we already see, of course, the fracture of the shared reality because of tribal, narrowcast media, each telling their own story, and social media, creating bubbles of reality. And I think AI can just accelerate these trends. Just the ability to spread misinformation and to have multiple different sources, of misinformation being AI can create mass panic with a certain kind of fictional news story, and that itself can then cause actual disastrous problems. Or someone with their AI can figure out how to shut down the power grid. There's just a lot of, you don't realize how much if the power grid goes down, we lose the internet. We lose, of course, like all of our major, home functions and everything. And just total chaos. It's like civilization seems like it's all robust and works fine because like the power is always on reliably. The water is always coming out of the faucets. Like if you just disrupt certain little key nodes here and there, you can shake these things that we all just think are automatic. So we should always like appreciate that it is, even though it's robust, what the civilization we live in, it's also fragile and something, really there's some major new source of power and intelligence just appearing on the scene can absolutely like shake some of those fragile aspects.
I've been prepping for a show with Vinod Khosla, and he's spoken before about his concern around strong AI moving into the hands of the Chinese and deglobalization becoming more and more prevalent with these very segmented, really kind of silos of the world. Do you share his concern around the kind of segmentation of the world, deglobalization, and the ability for the Chinese to have such a stronghold on strong AI?
Yeah, I mean, as an American who's used to feeling like America is the most powerful country in most ways, so you get really spoiled by that, where you just kind of think we're safe because we have better technology and we have bigger economy and a bigger military, and that's, and no one has the right to feel that way. Americans are very fortunate to have grown up like in a place where you just feel like, no other country could like come in here and really do damage here because we're America, So yeah, I think all Americans should, if they're used to that, they should stop getting used to that and think like, it's maybe not going to be so stable and simple as it has been. But as far as like the bigger picture on like, like the effect of technology on geopolitics, I haven't done enough deep dive to really have a strong opinion in there that I'm not basically just regurgitating from some smart friend of mine.
Well, you'd be a true VC if you were able to do that.
Yeah.
Then I would tell you your fund should be raised today. I do have one final one for a quick fire. It's just, given the breadth of your research and work and looking ahead, are you optimistic about the future for human civilization, or does climate change, levels of debt, dangers of AI overcome that optimism?
Yeah, it's interesting. When it comes to stuff like climate change, those problems I feel optimistic about because I'm like, I think that AI, if things go well, I think we're going to have so many answers in the near future. I think we're going to solve so many problems that seem really hard to us right now. I think these problems won't be a match for 2050s humanity. I'm incredibly optimistic about what could happen with health and human lifespan and, just biotech and things like that. So things that had stressed me out, like the problems we currently have, I feel very like optimistic about. The problem is that the same thing that makes me feel optimistic about those, which is AI, also makes me wonder whether the negatives of that thing are going to completely overwhelm the positives. If we don't have a stable society, like none of this matters. And so I do think there's like, think of it this way. It's like there's a spaceship coming towards us with super intelligent aliens on it, and we're pretty sure that they will know how to solve all of our problems. We also don't know what their deal is going to be, whether they're going to want to hurt us or whether they're going to not care about us either way, and they're going to just start building stuff and destroying our cities and without any concern for us either way. So would I feel optimistic? It's like, on one hand, the problems we have, I'm like, the aliens are going to have answers. That's incredible. We've never had answers to any of these things. On the other hand, I'm like, but the aliens are coming, and that's pretty like terrifying. So yeah, I think it's like, I think the rational person in me would be like, no, I feel more pessimistic than optimistic, but I also am just kind of an optimistic person. I think a lot of times what these answers come down to is, what do you tend to be optimistic or pessimistic? And if you do, you tend to be that here. So deep down, I still kind of feel like if I went in a time machine and got out in 2080, I'd be entering an amazing world, not a horrible dystopia. But I couldn't really defend that argument.
No, I agree with you, and I get you, and I think it's easy outside of certain time periods to think, oh my God, look at all of these challenges that we face. But then remember World War One, World War Two, when it was a concern of where do you get your next meal, food shortages, debt levels that were unparalleled, actually far worse. And so I do totally agree with you there. And listen, I want to move into a quick fire round, my friend. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
Okay, so what piece of content has been most transformative to your thinking?
In general, wow.
Yeah.
I always like to cite like The Fountainhead as a book that crystallized a really important concept in my head. It's about reasoning from first principles versus reasoning by analogy. I think it's a great book and people should read it. And then like I've had my whole worldview kind of like clarified and sharpened by listening to great history podcasts over the last few years. You know, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, William something, I forget his first name, Stroud's History of English. Again, I'm forgetting his name, but Fall of Civilizations. You know, so I love history podcasts. And I feel like I've learned a ton from those and just feel like everything's a little clearer after having listened through to hundreds of hours of good history podcasts.
What's your biggest regret?
First thing that pops to mind is like all of my like recent stock decisions. If you could combine those all into one giant like regret. Yeah. Just like the last 3 years of like any kind of investment decisions. I was like, let's do a huge investment right at the peak in 2021 before everything crashed. You know, it's like, oh, I feel like
I've learned very quickly.
I sold Tesla at like when it was at 700 before it split. So it was like one, I don't know, 1/8 or 10th of what it is now. I made a couple good ones along the way, but it's like just soul crushing.
What have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
I mean, AI, like I don't think 12 months ago I had any inkling that AI might steal my job within like 2 years. I would have guessed like 20. So that's I mean, and that's one of 100 different things that I've been shocked about with AI in the last few months, like everyone else.
Do you change how you do what you do with that realization?
Not really. It just makes me want to diversify a little bit, not just, I was already going to start a podcast, but it makes me want to do that sooner because it's like, let's not have articles be the only thing. But I feel like, it's something that big. I'm like, I'm not going to I'm going to do my thing. And when that comes and changes things, I'll adapt then and, figure out ways to do things in a new way if I have to.
Will Elon Musk be successful with Twitter?
If again, you put me in a time machine 5 years from now, my gut is I come out and the answer is yes. Just because this guy does things well. And sometimes it takes a while, right? And there's going to be a lot of experimentation. It's going to be a lot of failure along this experimentation way because that's how a real experimenter does things. They're fast and dirty and they make a bunch of decisions that they're like, oh, that was. So I think it's going to be a rocky road, but I think it ends up in a place where you're like, oh, wow, there's this actually now. It's like suddenly we realize like this app is better than any of these others. And, it'll happen eventually.
You can choose a dinner party guest, anyone, dead or alive. Who would it be?
I think if there's no translator, like Richard Feynman, and if there is a translator, someone weird like Genghis Khan, just because like what the hell is going on in his head? Like if I could just talk to him and be like, tell me how you think about the world, that would be cool.
I got asked a penultimate one on a holiday the other day by a friend. They said, what question do you least want to be asked when being asked questions?
Probably at this moment, like what are your thoughts on like, I mean, you just did one of these, but it was more about Twitter. What are your thoughts on like Elon and what's your, I don't like, you can, it's like, I don't want to dive into a world of very annoying arguments when I zoom out and I'm like, this guy is doing awesome shit. And so I'm sick of that question. I get it all the time because I wrote a lot about him. So
what a shit question. I mean, who would ask that, Tim, right?
Yours was different because it was about Twitter. I don't mind that question.
I just tweeted that X will be the most successful rebranding of the last 5 years. My Twitter is now like, this guy is the epitome.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Moron.
It's one of the stupidest worlds to wade into right now.
Legit, I've seen so many that's like, this guy is my joke of the day, and I'm just like, oh, maybe this was a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know. People need to just give it 5 years, and I think those people will look stupid.
Listen, I agree with you. Final one, Tim. Next 5 years for you. We sit down in 2028. Where do you want to be then?
I wod like to be doing what I'm doing now, indulging my curiosities and making cool things for readers that like what I do. Except I'd like to be doing it maybe on a bunch of different platforms. So I have some video, some audio, some maybe something on TV, maybe some more books. So I don't know. I want to keep experimenting. I hope I'll have discovered a couple new mediums that really work for me, because I don't want to just get lazy and just stick with the one kind of thing that I started with. So yeah, I hope I'm doing the same thing, but on a lot more ways.
Listen, I've been such a fan of your work for such a long time. Having the chance to do this with you is immensely special for me. So thank you so much for being so open and for joining me today, Tim.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
Dude, you're a hero. Thank you so much for that.